Hello, hello, Kayla. Welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Hi, Olivia. I'm good. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm ready to talk about this song. But before we do, for those of that are listening that are new to you, maybe they're new to me, what tell them about you. Like, why do we have any jurisdiction, you and I, having this conversation? I mean, yes, we're women, so we can have this conversation. But also, I know when we were talking about this in the work that both of us do and in what we both believe and what we both teach and all of that and embody in our own lives and our own work, coming together. Can you give people a little intro of you, who you are, what you do? And why you're passionate about this topic.
Sure, yeah. So professionally, I am a women's feminine embodiment fitness coach. So I teach women how to do fitness femininely. And basically that just means training and eating with our lunar cycles, our menstrual cycles. I
Mm,
feel like that's a good place to start. I've always believed that the physical 3D experience is the manifestation of our 5D spiritual experience. So I
mm,
start women with their hormones and really connecting back into and grounding into their body's natural physical rhythms as
mhm,
the transcendent experience of our spiritual magic and capacity.
mm,
So that's what I do in and out of the gym. That's how I live my life and what I try to teach women to do. And really that was how I got my fitness transformation, was how I became introduced really to my divine feminine and
mm,
that whole spiritual experience. So I always say fitness was like my gateway drug to spirituality in a new way, because I was
mm,
raised in a Christian household, and that gave me a really amazing like foundation in that as a religion. But my relationship with my creator didn't really take shape until my mid 20s, I would say.
mhm, mhm,
And that was after I had a failed marriage and went through a divorce and um, different things in my own life that just
mm,
really helped me build that relationship with that side of myself. And so it was really empowering to go through that. And I would say that the awakening really took had more momentum behind it the last 3 to 4 years for
mhm,
me. I'm 31 now, and really created some momentum in my life
mm,
spiritually with with that. And so I just feel really passionate about the state of our culture,
mhm,
and having the physical kind of leading the way as my gateway, so to speak, to the
mm,
spiritual. I've just seen it through different um, filters. Like in
mm,
my when I at 16, I entered into the fashion industry as a runway model. Before that, I was a performer as a dancer and performance artist for my entire life. My mom got
wow.
me into ballet with my sister at 3, so I was like always on stage performing, and very tapped into culture based off of
Mm,
music specifically as a dancer, and how that affects our bodies as women and how that affects our subconscious.
mm,
um, and then the fashion industry introduced me to a whole new world. It's not music specific, but a whole new world of culture that
mm,
kind of had a lot to play there. So I'm just really, really passionate about it. And for the feminine, I'm passionate about both feminine and masculine, because
mhm,
that polarity is it's so powerful. And
mm,
sexual energy as creative life force energy is everything.
yeah.
I mean, it's creator energy. So
Mm,
it takes both of those. We can't
mhm,
just have feminine energy. We can't just have masculine energy. None of us are just one sided. And I'm really passionate about how that affects men and women's relationships, our relationships with
mm.
ourselves, how it's affecting culture, and manifesting in the 3D in things like WAP.
Beautifully said. Yes. Oh my God. I completely agree with everything that you were saying. And although I don't work in fitness, I feel like I do this more with women in their business and in their relationship, their sex life, in terms of connecting back to their bodies, their life force, their own pussy, their own just connection to themselves, returning them home, really kind of
Yeah.
giving them that power back. I too grew up in a Christian household. My relationship with God, with spirit, with source looks different. Not necessarily in like the dogmatic fundamentalism version of Christianity that I grew up in, but a lot of what I believe could definitely bleed into still kind of the manifestation of Christianity. I just have a lot more
Mhm.
freedom and a lot more kind of less of the fear mongering, less of the shame around my body and my sexuality that I was raised on through purity culture. I've healed a lot of that trauma, that religious trauma, and now have a relationship that is much more built around kind of the masculine, feminine faces of God, and really feeling at home and connected to me in my physical realm just as much as I feel connected to myself in terms of a spiritual realm, and really
Yeah.
bringing that 3D and 5D experience together, where a lot of us try to hack our way out of being human and kind of hack our way to the 5D, and we play around a lot with these higher frequencies. And to me, that can be really dangerous if we don't have the safety and the connection and the grounding here in the physical plane in our 3D, because we're both fully human and fully divine. So when this
100%.
song
Yeah.
WAP came out, it was like interesting because I've worked in sexuality, I've worked in women's sexuality, feminine empowerment, really liberating women in this way. So I had some mixed reviews around, okay, whoa, like I see this video, because the song is one thing, the video is another thing. And if you haven't listened or watched, I would almost encourage you to pause here, go watch the video, go listen to the song, go read the lyrics specifically, and then come back,
Yeah.
knowing and honoring that you are a divine sovereign being who can have your own experience with it. We are just sharing our own personal experiences with it. We're not here to say this is right, this is wrong, this is good, this is bad. You have to agree with us. If you know me at all, if you know Kayla at all, we leave room for the both and. We leave room for different and multiple perspectives, and we can sit with all of it and be in kind of like a roundtable conversation around this topic. But when I
Yeah.
saw this song, I wanted to share on it, and you and I were chatting about it on Instagram, coming from people who work very closely with sexuality, with the divine feminine energy, with embodiment, with really bringing women back to their bodies. I think it would be an interesting perspective to share it on the podcast of like, how are we viewing this? Because there's two different sides right now online about this. There's one side, which is all about like, this is female empowerment, this is sexual liberation, this is us finally like taking back our pleasure and our bodies and our sexuality, and like this fire and this like very feminist viewpoint of the song.
Mhm.
And then there's the opposite side where it's like, this is vulgar, this is disgusting, this is wrong, this is bad, this is setting women back, and really kind of this attack on the song. So I would love for us to start to unpack from both of our perspectives, kind of like you said, our first impressions of the song, and then we can kind of pick apart different pieces. And again,
Yeah.
wherever you stand on the spectrum of where you feel on this song, remember, you can also hold a both and. You can be for it and kind of triggered or against it in a certain way. You can be somewhere in the gray. There's no black or white here. It really is just us sharing kind of where we're coming from, where our own convictions and our own discernment is leading us. And you can take it or leave it. Take what you want, leave the rest.
Yeah. Amen. Beautiful.
Yeah.
I
So
agree.
what were your first thoughts? Because I remember I texted you and you were like, okay, what? You went and watched it, and then you gave me like the most killer
Yeah.
review.
You texted me and I was like, "Oh God, now I have to do this. Like now I have to face this song," because I'd heard about it and I was seeing like little clips surfacing on Instagram and YouTube, and I was totally avoiding it because quite
Mhm.
frankly, kind of like because I haven't watched mainstream media or the news for years, I've done the same thing with culture. Like I'm so behind in, or I should say, pop culture, like the music industry. I'm so behind in areas of rap
Mm,
and hip hop specifically because there's not a whole lot that I can get behind in
mhm,
that industry
mhm,
recently, the last few years. So when it comes to like country music, even with country music, I'm super critical because so much of that music is completely toxic codependency,
mhm, mhm.
but it's still like more positive and a little bit more wholesome than a lot of what we're seeing in the rap scene.
Right.
And while I've been, I don't know, impressed is the first word that comes to mind, so I'm going to just go with it. While I've been impressed with the quote unquote forward movement of more women coming into the rap and hip hop scene on
Mm,
one hand, um, the other hand is that I'm disappointed in the way that those feminine energied creatures have shown up in the rap and
mm,
hip hop scene. because we had this incredibly vulgar and masculine, like, I don't really like the term toxic masculinity or feminist or whatever, but at the same time, there was a lot of aggressive toxicity in the rap and hip hop culture, singing about their own experiences. I understand that, like, just sharing about, there's a lot of rough stuff out there. And so they're sharing that with the world, but putting that on a pedestal and then having women come in, and instead of balancing the narrative, I feel like these women specifically, like Cardi B and the song that we're talking about right now, I loved the way that Russell Brand put it when he said that basically we have women just playing into the paradigm of the quote unquote toxic patriarchy that they think exists and is so prevalent that they want to go against.
Right.
But they're just playing in the same box instead of creating a new paradigm shift around what sex means in that culture. Because I understand that, like, there's subsets of culture, and rap and hip hop is kind of like a subset. Then you've got the redneck country boys and girls, then you've got the SoCal girls. Like, there's all over the world. There's going to be different cultures, and music is such a beautiful, powerful representation of culture. So I feel like on the battlefield of music, we're working through a lot of subliminal issues energetically that there aren't even words for or language for necessarily, but just like on a spiritual level, we all get that initial reaction to a song when we hear it. And my initial reaction when I was listening to this song, because when you texted me first, I read the lyrics and then I turned on the music, and then I could not stomach the music video until the next day. Like, I had to process through the energy that first day, and could not look at it because I just knew. I was just like, I mean, I've seen pictures of the music video on memes and stuff, but I just knew that it was going to be a thing for me to digest, and I needed space for it. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to give that its own 24-hour stint. But my first reaction was just like, I'm so disappointed. Like, I'm just so disappointed. And I wanted to be like, I really want to see it from the feminist perspective, or there's a part of me that wants to see it from the feminist perspective of this is liberating, but I just can't. Like, I look at it and I'm kind of like, this is really disappointing that these women who have such platforms, who come from sordid pasts, self-admittedly. I mean, Cardi B's admitted to raping men. I'm sorry, but it's drugging and raping men. Like, that's okay. So we're going to put her on a platform. She has this platform. And instead of preaching or sharing or teaching things that are, encouraging men and women to be more, we are just supposed to submit to like our most basic lustful desires and make it as vulgar as possible in this box, using this language that is so aggressively masculine. And I'm not anti-man. I'm not saying masculine as like I'm only pro feminine and I'm super woman, man hater. That's not what I mean when I say that. I'm just saying, like, for both feminine and masculine energies, there's light and dark. And when you're dealing with sexual energy, and there's always going to be light and dark. Like, when people say, oh, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual, I'm like, okay, well, but what kind of spiritual? Because there's light and dark.
There's light and dark. Absolutely. Yep.
So we have to, like, I just want better for our culture. Like, I don't like the narrative that women are playing into. I feel like I'm all over the place right now, but like, especially in the shadow of the BLM movement that's been so profoundly loud in our culture this year. Why are we not expecting better? We have these two huge, as far as like powerful women of color putting out this kind of content. Like, with the platforms that they have, why are we not talking about important things instead of just what sounds like a real personal issue to have a WAP that is that wet. You know what I mean? Like, it sounds like you need, I love Ben Shapiro's video because I was seriously thinking, like, this sounds like a personal problem. Like, this is a lot of fluid.
Didn't
Like, I
he say
feel
that
like,
his wife is a
yeah,
gynecologist and she was like, you
yeah,
need to get this checked if you actually need a bucket and a mop? Yeah. Yeah.
exactly,
Uh-huh.
exactly. And so I'm like, that was just my first impression,
Mhm.
is that I was just really disappointed. It was a real turn off for me.
Mm,
And I'm like, I'm not like some prude, you know, I don't need to like, I don't feel like I need to
mhm,
talk about my sex life
mm.
because it involves someone else is very private, but like, I
Yeah.
just don't understand the pedestalization
Mhm.
of that,
Mm. Beautifully said.
especially
Yeah.
especially with the context of that song. You know, if anyone's familiar with the song and the lyrics, it's like the context of that song is not in a safe relationship container or a respectful
Mhm,
relationship container. I mean, I
mhm,
think there's a verse where Meg the Stallion's literally talking about going down on one guy right before another guy gets in her. I mean, so we're talking about making him feel like he's cheating and,
mm,
you know, screwing multiple men at the same
mhm.
time, basically. And I'm just sort of like, okay, there's no boundaries here. Like, is basically what liberation means now, is what I'm
Right.
getting from this song.
Which
It's
is
like
like,
there's
wait,
zero
yeah, this there's
boundaries.
like a lack of safety and a lack of consent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mhm, mhm.
Um,
Which further perpetuates rape culture.
thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so yeah, that was my first impression. I went all over
Yeah.
the place on that, but
No, great points. Great points. I
yeah.
mean, I think the hard part I have is that, yeah, so when my first kind of impression before I like took time to really sit with it and dissect it and analyze it and be with it was I was kind of in the middle, in the sense of like, the first part of me is I can see the perspective of this is giving women their power back, in the sense of over their own pleasure, over their own body, their own pussy. Like, we're removing the stigma of shame, which is great, all
Mhm.
for it, all freaking for it. And so I'm like, yeah, hell yeah, more power to these women. Get it, girl. Like, very much like, you do you, like whatever you're into, if that's what you're into,
Sure.
like the macaroni and cheese and whatever, like
Yeah.
by all means, like you do you. Because I look at it too from the lens of the erotic blueprint system that I work with. If you are a sexual or a kinky blueprint, this video is most likely, some part of it is your jam, right? It's like, the
Right.
sexual blueprint is all about just anything we associate with sex. So, stick it in, let's give a blow job, let's do this. Like, anything sexual in our culture is like a huge turn on for them. They can go from 0 to 60 really quickly. You've got the kinky side that's into like the weird shit. Like, we've got the chains, we've got, and I don't say weird shit in like a judgy way, because I have a lot of kinky in me. So like, I can
Right.
get I
Right.
can get down with some kink. I'm not against it by any
Yeah.
means. There is a lot of shame in our culture around it. That's why we have to keep, again, going into this sexual liberation. However, the kinky is into anything that's taboo. So we've got the chains, we've got kind of this weird fun house vibe, we've got, this idea of all the different lyrics that are happening and at play here. So there's a lot to there that's like, ooh, okay, cool. This appeals to the kinky. Now, if you're a
Yeah.
sensual or an energetic blueprint, you're most likely completely turned off by this, because you're like, holy shit, that's way too much for me. Not my kind of turn on. There's no judgment there, but like, this is not for me. And that's beautiful. All of our sexualities, all of our preferences, our likes, our dislikes, our turn ons, our turn offs are totally different. So part of me was trying to see it through that lens of, if I had a client that came to me and they were into this, can I hold space for them? And the answer is yes. I've held space for people in their sex lives who are into all kinds of stuff,
Mhm.
and really have been even mind blown of like, wow, like people are so different. How cool is that, that we're
Yeah.
so uniquely wired in our own turn ons and turn offs? So I can see that side. Someone had talked about it too, like, again, the whole shame thing, we're removing it and like liberating women. And I could see that. So I had this conflicting view, because then the other part of me was like, something feels so off energetically here. And it was weird to me that it was like a fun house vibe, because like, are we appealing to children? I'm kind of confused, because like, again, if we want to look
Barbie
at
colors. Yeah.
if we want to look at kind of the zooming out of it and looking at the overall picture of how we're being programmed, especially if you go like radical left in terms of, you know, normalizing pedophilia and like decriminalizing it, the trafficking that's going on, the like little subliminal messages that are in Disney movies, that are in everywhere, that's really making sex at a very, 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 very young age totally normal. And we're
Yeah.
making it this super chill vibe around our bodies and sexualities and sex that, again, where's the safety, where's the consent, where's the boundaries? Because children don't have the cognizance to watch this video and understand any of that. As adults, we do. So we can watch it. And again, I can get down with some kinky archetype. I can get down with the horror archetype. I can get down with
Yeah.
like the dominatrix vibe in the bedroom. I'm all freaking for it. Really,
Right.
ask my sweet husband. I'm all for it.
Yeah.
But at the
100%.
same time, there is this sense of something in my body was like energetically the programming that's happening here, who this is appealing to. You have to look, Kylie Jenner's in the video. Her audience is very, very young. She was
Thank you.
sexualized very, very young. And you have to look at just kind of this overall sense of, again, like you said, it's we're telling men we don't want to be objectified. We're telling men we don't want to be sexualized. My body is not, just because I'm showing skin doesn't mean you have the right to look at me like that, or anything like that. But yet we're doing it, and we're literally, they're grinding and they're like showing their, like the nipples are out and the pussy is dripping all over, and you're trying to tell a man, and again, it's not in the sense of how you dress or how you act or how you dance invites a man forward. Consent is a totally different conversation. I'm just talking about, you're saying don't look at me like that, and but at the same time, like, you're activating their very primal instinct of this woman. Like, it's natural. Like, I was talking to my husband about this. If there's a woman that's completely dressed head to toe over here and she's dancing, compared to this naked woman who's talking about her pussy in a very like sexualized, vulgar way, naturally their body is going to have things happen. Now, does that give them the right to go touch her? No. Again, consent. However, what's activating in their instinct, and same with
Yeah.
women, right? Go gender or not, we have this like, oh, let's fucking make a baby. Like, our very instincts are like, okay, go on and let's do the thing that we were designed to do in this moment and
Yeah.
procreate.
That
So
primal drive.
yeah, this
Yeah.
like hunger. And so, like Russell Brand was saying in his video about it, is it's not that these women aren't beautiful. It's not that we're not for women's sexuality. It's not that I'm not pro, you know, just like completely letting all of your turn-ons and kinks and everything out to party, because bring it all to the table. But like, where are the boundaries? Where is the hypocrisy and double standard around women and being objectified? And like, how is this us demanding respect? That's where I get really confused in terms of like, I can see we're going forward, but then are we also taking steps back? And who's the ultimate authority to have that objective truth of what is right and wrong? What are limits? What are boundaries? What are the morals at play here? Because we're all seeing it through our own lenses. So that's where my curiosity leads me into, okay, so if it's okay for me to watch as an adult, but it's not okay for my kid to watch, do they get to an age where then they can watch it? Is that like, I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
Because they're going to listen to
I
it. They're going to hear
yeah,
it.
obviously, because
Yeah.
as is result with teens and tweens already making TikTok videos to this song, um, it's out there. My thing is that I just my sweet man puts it perfectly. I asked him about this song after I talked to our roommate about this song, and his response was classic Joe and exactly what I expected. Where basically he was just like, "Yeah, I don't get it.
Yeah. Right.
I don't get it." And I didn't make him suffer through the music video, but he listened to like the first verse and like gave me that look that was just like, I'm done, you know?
That's what my Joe
'Cause-
did too. He was like,
Yeah,
nope. Yep.
yeah, I'm done. And but something that he's always said,
Mm-hmm.
because we've had these conversations, as I'm sure you've had with your man, where it's just like, okay, so why are the expectations or the standards for women sexually, quote unquote, different in our culture than it is for men?
Mm.
Because let's go back to this whole thing that, call it purity culture or whatever, but like in our regular daily culture and everyday life, men are considered men after they've had sex
Mm.
in a lot of cases. You know, it's like you're not really a man until you've popped your cherry, so to speak.
Mhm.
Whereas
Mhm.
women, suddenly you're a slut.
Mm.
There's so much more value
Mhm.
associated to, in our culture, there's so much more value
Mhm.
associated to a woman's sexual number, notch count, virginity, like whatever terminology you want to use,
Mhm.
versus a man's.
Mm.
Men, as they get older and they become more, call it promiscuous or just sexually experienced, they are seen, even in a lot of circles of women in their mentality, they're seen as their sexual experience means he can better please me. So that's
Mhm.
attractive.
Mhm.
Versus when men look at women in most circles, a lot of
Mhm.
them are going to say, even especially if they're more traditional, a lot of them are going to say, I don't want my girl
Mm.
who's had X, Y, and Z. I think that number is different for every man, but like, I don't want a girl that's had X, Y, and Z partners, because then
Mhm.
I'm like, I'm competing against all those
Mhm.
partners. Like,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? So, and then a lot of men and a lot of religions are like, virginity is the only way for women, but that does
Mhm.
not hold true for men in that same religion. So it's
Mm.
like, Joe and I have had these conversations before, and he always comes back to, he's like, well, because women are better than men, so we expect
Mm.
better. And I'm like, and
Mm.
he says it and he's tongue in cheek, you know, because
Right.
it just makes sense with the way that things are presented to us in
Right.
culture, that that's sort of the thought process subliminally. So, you know, I say that, and he says it being kind of tongue in cheek, because it's just like, well, there's
Mm.
higher standards because we expect more from you. You're better, so
Mm.
be better.
Right.
So when I listen to this song and I hear, you know, the lack of boundaries, the lack of standards, you know, it's like, I don't subscribe to the shame mentality around women's
Mhm.
sexuality.
Right.
I don't believe in that. I don't believe that's healthy. You and I both experienced that. But
Mhm.
at the same time, I want us to collectively, men and women,
Mhm.
hold ourselves to a higher standard in this
Mhm.
aspect of life, because the message that this song is brainwashing the teens and tweens and the young adults
Mhm.
with
Mhm.
is that in order to get a ring on your finger, you need to have a WAP, and
Mhm.
you need to use it in a certain way along with your
Mhm.
mouth, so
Mhm.
that he can swipe his credit card for you.
Mhm.
Like,
Right.
it's totally, you know, on one hand, we don't want, as a feminist movement, you're not supposed to be looking at women a certain way.
Mhm.
Well, you're also not supposed to be looking at a man as a bank account.
Right.
Like, if you're
Well,
a feminist,
yep.
and really, really want to be equal,
Mm.
why do you want him to spend a bunch of money on you because of
Right.
your WAP?
Well, and you also made a good point too when you were talking about the double standard in terms of, as women, we need more time to warm up, and there's times where we might not be able
Mhm.
to perform this certain way. Well, then in this song,
Right,
we're just like talking about you've got to be big and you've got to be hard and long. And we're talking about like a men's dick. And we do this too with like, small dick energy. We're shaming small dicks, right? When we use that
right,
terminology, where like this whole thing was going on with the BLM movement of like racism is being racist is small dick energy. And like, while I get what they're saying and I agree with the context of the message, at the same time, you are now body shaming men with small dicks, which they can't actually help. I'm sorry, but like, if my son is born with a small dick, like, should I feel bad for him? Should I pity him? Should I have him have surgery to like fix that? Like, no, like, that is what
no,
God gave him. I can trust that. And I believe he can still have great sex. And it's weird to think about my kid having sex, but like, that's real. But it's this idea that
but
like
legit,
we've got this double standard in terms of
yeah,
like body liberation and body positivity. You're not allowed to judge me and make me look or act or perform a certain way. But then we're doing the exact opposite in shaming men. And think about their lack of quote unquote performance is very obvious compared to women, where we can fake shit all day long. So you've also
amen.
got to put yourself in other people's shoes of like the men listening to this song who are now shamed because they don't have this, or women who are like, oh my God, I'm not that lubricated. I need lube in order to
Right,
be able to have this experience. What's wrong with my pussy? And these like young girls that are doing these videos and listening to this and dancing to this, who don't have the cognizance yet to understand what this song is actually about. And this
Yeah.
is what we're talking about in terms of being programmed and brainwashed and conditioned through not only like the sound waves of the music, that's one thing, because that affects
Mm-hmm.
us, like you were talking about at the beginning, but then you also have the
Vibrational.
lyrics, you have the video, you have what's acting and playing out. And is this how we want? And again, there's no judgment here. These are genuine questions I have to sit with too as I bring
Yeah.
kids into this. Is this the kind of culture we want our children to grow up in? Because if there's like 8 to 11-year-olds dancing to WAP on TikTok, but like they haven't even gotten their period yet, they don't even understand their body yet, they're like, can they be kids, or do we not have that anymore? Like, I'm sorry, but
Right.
what happens to the awkward middle school phase where like we didn't really fit in our bodies yet, we had weird braces, and like the eyeliner was too thick, we had the stick bangs, like it was just disgusting. And we were kids. We weren't expected
Right.
to be sexy or be in our sexuality yet. I don't know personally, like, what age do we start teaching that? Like, is it okay for, how many naked children do I have to see on Instagram stories where I'm like, oh my God, why are we posting naked pictures of our children? There are
Yeah.
sickos out there. There are evil people out there. And not to, again, shame your kid to put their clothes on, but teach them limits and boundaries so that they know how to operate in the world. What does that
100%.
look like? I don't know.
100%. Yeah. Well, and that's going to be, that's the responsibility of being a parent, to
Mhm.
figure that out. You know what I mean? And it's huge responsibility. I'm
Mhm.
not envious of your stage of life right now. I'm
I'm just
super
grateful I'm
excited
not
for
having
you.
a girl. I'm gonna be
But
honest. I
yeah,
can't.
exactly. And that's Joe, that's exactly what Joe and I said too. We're talking about this song, is it's just like, oh my God, he specifically said, like, I'm so glad, like, we don't have a daughter. We don't have a son either. But like,
Mhm.
at the same time, between the two, you know,
Mhm.
and my response was, yeah, I totally understand that, babe. But at the same time, how would you teach a son
I know.
in
That's what
this?
my Joe said. Mhm.
Yeah, like, I
Mhm.
mean, great, great breeding ground for some intense conversations between a lot of
Mhm.
people right now, which is exactly what you and I are doing, which I think is great.
Mhm.
But yeah, yeah, I'm 100% with you. And I just think that with this, as Russell so eloquently put it, goddess energy that
Mhm.
these women are bringing out, it's like, yes, as I said earlier, there's this incredible life force creator energy that is sexual energy.
Mm.
There's no separating that.
Yeah.
Sexual energy is creative life force energy. That's how we
Mhm.
all came into
Mhm.
this world, was through sex. Let's not pretend it's anything else, right?
Mhm.
So we all know that we bump nasties from time to time, but at the same time, with that incredible power
Mm.
should come incredible responsibility.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
this is where I just kind of get off the train of the liberation feminist movement, and when years ago, when I kind of was like realizing what direction this was going, is like
Right.
I just jumped off the train, because in my early 20s, my late teens, early 20s, I was a little feminist. If I look back on it, the way that my mind
Mhm.
was thinking about things,
Mhm.
the way that I was talking about things. I was married at the time, and I was still like, there was other things going on, but I was still kind of in that trajectory. And I got off because it just kind of became revealed to me that this is not going in a healthy direction. This is not setting up a new
Right.
paradigm, operating in a safe container. I'm sorry, we're talking about wet ass pussy when 99% of the women listening to this song, and the two women that are in that song, I guarantee you, are on hormonal birth control, which
Mhm.
dries you up 9 times out of 10.
Mhm.
So we're shaming women who don't get that wet. That's creating some sort of expectation for men and women that
Mhm.
you're supposed to sound like a macaroni bowl. And like you mentioned beautifully, setting up these expectations for men to be a
Mhm.
certain way in the bedroom as well.
Mhm.
It's just like, it's just porn culture, and
Mhm.
be, coming into our music industry verbally, like, I
Mhm.
just don't, to me, it's like, okay, so porn is readily available, yes, but it's not like, I understand you and I agree that there's programming going on in cartoons and stuff, but it's not like Disney Channel is playing triple X porn.
Mhm.
Okay, like there's still a
Well,
boundary
there's
there.
the grooming and the desensitization
Yeah.
that's happening, where we're literally desensitizing these children and parents alike, right? Like we are
Yes.
like it would have been very easy for both of us even a couple years ago to just be like, oh yeah, fuck yeah, this got a good beat, like I'm getting it.
Right.
Now it's like, oh, I have the cognizance to be like, wait a second, whoa, this is playing
Exactly.
into the narrative that's at play in our culture, and by me promoting this, I am subscribing to this and then
Yeah.
bringing kids into this. Where do they fit in? And now, like, there's this whole, like you're saying, this whole can of worms that we're kind of having these powerful conversations, which is important to have. But you're right. It's like, it's this grooming. And that's where the child exploitation is happening, where Tim
Yeah.
Ballard talked about it with Candace Owens. And she asked him, is sexual liberation, because she's like, we can never quite be liberated enough. She was like, is this constant like pushing of the boundary, pushing, is that leading to the increase in child trafficking? And he said 100%, because what's happening is you've got the naked pictures of your kids online. You've got these
Hmm.
like 8-year-old tweens, twerking to WAP on TikTok. You've got like this sexualization of like don't call them minors or young, they're fucking
Children. Yeah.
children. Right.
Yeah.
Again, more grooming and desensitization by the way that the media is changing the
Thank you.
verbiage. But we're
100%.
seeing these kids, and Tim Ballard, who owns and operates and is the founder of Operation Underground Railroad, who is fighting child trafficking and rescuing these kids. He said this is what pedophiles and what the traffickers do. They sit on Instagram, they sit on TikTok, they sit on these different places, they promise you a better life, they screenshot shit, they go, like, this is where this is happening. The breeding ground is through our sexual liberation
Yeah.
via social media, that's getting younger and younger and younger and younger. And again, I'm all about sexual liberation. I'm all about this whore archetype. I'm all about playing with whatever kink you're into in the bedroom. Please, absolutely. But again, where is the container? Where is the
Thank
safety, the
you.
trust, the
Yeah.
consent, the respect? This is where things are getting very blurred. And this is where I'm having these really difficult curiosities and challenging conversations with people like you, where I'm like, am I perpetuating this by, preaching sexual liberation? Where do I always put a disclaimer? Is it the artist's responsibility to say, consent is required? Like, where is the responsibility that we all have in this, to be
Yeah.
liberated, but to also be very mindful of the real fuckery that's going on in our world right now?
Exactly. Ugh, so much of what you just said is so spot on. Like absolutely dittos. But and not but and at the same time, I'm just sort of like with that responsibility because these artists, we have to kind of give them credit that we know that they're creating out of their experiences,
Right. True.
right? So like my heart goes out to these women as well, because what they're singing about, what they have been singing about, and what they are creating is being birthed out of their personal life experiences.
Mm,
That's how creation happens. So when I'm hearing what they're saying, I'm hearing a lot of trauma.
yeah. Did
And
and my
this
question
is
is that
their
though, my question, Kayla, is did they write it? Or is it men that wrote it? They're on the writing credits because they have part of it. But is it men
right,
that wrote it and they're the faces of it? Therefore, we ignore that it's actually objectifying women that men wrote
right.
about, like where,
And
like that
either
part of it.
way,
Yeah.
amen. And either way, like either side of that coin is still traumatizing,
Right.
in my
True.
opinion.
True.
Because if they're being forced to do this, which I don't really believe, but at the same time, anything's
Mhm.
possible in today's day and age.
Mhm.
Like if whether they're being forced to do this or they're legitimately like cry for help, singing about their own
Mhm.
experiences, and this is part of their own therapy of working through
Mhm.
that,
True.
my heart breaks on both accounts because it's
Mhm.
just not, it's not healthy, it's not right, it's not love, it's not safe.
Mhm.
And I feel like like I mentioned earlier, it's the desensitization that you've been bringing into the conversation with the kids and the subliminal
Mhm.
messaging, and the parents are being desensitized because it's not triple X porn on Disney, it's
Right.
subliminal, is
Right.
my point. It's like if it was just smack in our face, a lot of people would be like, what the f, You know what I mean? Like, that's so inappropriate. Duh.
Mm,
But that's what we're doing with this music. It's triple
yeah.
X.
Yeah.
And we have,
And
like, we would never let an 8-year-old do a TikTok. I don't know what they're called. Like, do a TikTok reaction video to a triple X porn scene.
right.
But we're gonna let an 8-year-old do a dance on TikTok to this song, which I would rate as R at least, because it's so
Absolutely.
blatant and it's so vulgar. And we're gonna sit here and pretend
Yeah.
like, yes, our vision and what we actually see through our eyes is so powerful, but
Mm,
we're gonna sit here and pretend like our hearing and our frequency and vibration
mhm.
isn't just as easily impacted.
Mm.
Like, there's
Damn.
so much responsibility that needs to be taken here in the music industry. And like, why aren't we singing about, you want to sing about
Mm,
sex and female liberation? Okay, why are there no songs that sound
mm,
anything remotely near the Song of Solomon? Like,
mm.
Christians don't even want to do Bible studies on the Song of Solomon because it makes them too fucking uncomfortable. And I'm like, and that just drives me nuts, because
Right.
I'm like, so this is why young kids get married and then they have fucking terrible sex lives with their
Yeah.
significant other, their
Yep.
husband or their wife, because they don't know what healthy sex looks like, because mom and dad are prudes and they don't want to talk to the kids about it. And the kids aren't even hearing about it in Bible study. All they have is a
Right.
sex ed class in high school,
Right. Yep.
which is basically like, take birth control for women, because no one actually teaches women what goes on in their bodies during puberty,
Mm,
and tells men to put on a condom.
mhm,
Like,
mhm.
oh my God, that's sex ed? Really?
Right.
It's
Right.
tragic.
God, this is so spot on. This is, I mean, 100% to everything that you're saying. And this is where I get confused too in terms of sexual liberation and empowerment through this depiction. And again, like, I have to play devil's advocate, and how much is one song can we like attribute, and like one artist, like
Oh,
their
100%.
how
Yeah.
much like are we putting on them, or like they need to paint the entire picture of like the sacredness of sex but also the sexual kinky, fuckery of sex, and like they can both play a part and all of this. Like there is a lot here where it's like it's a 3.5 minute song, so how much
Oh,
can they really
totally.
do?
And if someone hasn't, let's just say, for sake of conversation, let's just say that Meg the Stallion and Cardi have never experienced sacred sex, sacred energy exchange. All
Right.
they've experienced is this fuckery. Well,
Mhm.
they're not going to be able to speak on the sacred side of it because it's
Exactly.
not their experience. So
Right.
I'm not like, I'm not trying to crucify the artists. I'm just saying, like, can we have a conversation about just expecting more from culture and people who have a platform that's being
Mm,
used this way? Like, I'm sorry, but even Christian artists, why aren't you singing about marital bliss? Make a
right.
song out of the Song of Solomon. You do it out of the Psalms. I mean, I'm just saying, like,
I'm just picturing, like back in the day, like listening to a song. I think there was actually, it wasn't Stacey or Rico. There was one of them that wrote this song, and I remember always being like, "Oh my God, I'm gonna get
oh
married, and
my
this is gonna
God.
be our song." What
I
was
just
it?
went back when you said Stacey or Rico.
Oh gosh, it's so
Oh,
good. But
sorry.
no, you're good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's this, I completely hear what you're saying. And so there, I love to share like the other side so people also
Yeah.
recognize we're not being like, we're right and this is the way. Like literally these are questions and curiosities and
Mm-hmm.
kind of pieces that we're playing into this. But I
Mm-hmm.
also have to wonder, in terms of sexual liberation, sexual empowerment for women, is our songs like this teaching that in order to be sexually liberated, it is like the video is very like approving energy of how wet I am, how much skin I show, how much I can grind and twerk and like, steal the show with my body. Where to me, sexual empowerment, sexual liberation is a frequency. It's an embodiment. It's
Yeah.
an energy and a flow and how a woman carries herself. Like I remember teaching this in the beginning of this when I started doing this work. I was like, I want to teach you how to feel so sexy and be able to command the presence of an entire room of people fully dressed, like with a turtleneck and knee-high boots. Like just you there, it's not skin. You're not calling and again, you can be sexual and you can show skin. I'm not saying that's wrong or to judge that, but when we're training these young women, it's like, okay, be sexier. Okay, play the part. Okay, take this on. They don't know what archetypes are. They don't know what any of this
Right.
is. They're just like, oh, here's how to be sexy. Here's how to get the man. And we have to look at diet culture and the body culture that we grew up with,
Oh
and
my
that
word,
around
yeah.
sexual liberation. So it's like, to me, really this sexual liberation and empowerment, we need to be teaching and reminding these young women, honey, it's not about how much skin you show. Although, again, if you want to, by all means. And again, what age does that become okay? I have, God only knows, I have no idea. But it's like
Well, and
this sense
also
of,
what, yeah,
yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying the sense of, you could be fully clothed if you wanted to be, and you could still command the room. You could still be this like powerful, creative life force, this erotic energy that you can bring literally through who you are, who you're being, not what you're doing, how much you're producing, and how much skin you're showing. Like, where are you trying to earn it and prove it than just being
Yeah.
embodied and knowing it? Totally different energies.
100%, 100%. One's very desperate
Mhm.
feeling, like that proving feeling that you're talking about. It's very desperate, in my opinion, which is that whole lack mentality, that scarcity mindset. Like if you're coming at this whole sexuality game with this desperate scarcity mindset of I need to prove, I need to get, we're also looking at two women who have had about as much plastic surgery done as the Kardashians, and we're
Right.
supposed to take them seriously as being body confident and body positive. I'm like, I'm sorry. Again, no judgment. Like, I've had Botox and, I've had my lips done, like, no judgment. You do you, boo. But at the same time, what is the reasoning behind it? Like what you're talking about with modesty versus how much skin you're showing and not showing. What
Mm.
is your reasoning behind it? Are you coming from a place of desperation where you're
Mm.
getting your boobs done and your butt done and you're showing your tits and all this stuff because you're in a scarcity mindset of I need to get the guy's attention or I need to
Mm.
prove something and this
Which
is
I
how I
think is
do
gonna
it?
be I think that is a lot of young girls because they don't know
Yeah,
yet. Because again,
exactly.
you could show your boobs, and the energy of it is gonna be very different when it's coming from a very empowered, like, I love my breasts and, like, I'm completely in my body. You can tell that kind of woman who does show a lot, but she's
Yeah,
embodied in a different way. The energy and the intention behind it is so different than someone that's, like, thirsty, like a thirsty energy.
thirsty.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
great word. That's a
Yeah.
great word. There's so much thirst trap culture going on in this video and in this song, and I'm just kind of like, I just my heart just breaks
Yeah.
for women and men that subscribe to that, and for men too. It's kind of like this is such a trap. This is like what I think is I'm just like, oh my god, this is coming from women who say getting the bag is getting him to pay child support. You know
Mm.
what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
so she's throwing it in your face literally in
Mm.
order to swipe your credit card. I mean, it could not be any more blatant. She wants her tuition paid, blah blah blah. We're going to glorify gold digging
Mm.
and call
Right.
it getting the ring. Well, your ring really doesn't mean much because we all know, their relationship is their own thing, but you're public figures. So Cardi, we know that your ring means that your man hasn't been faithful to you, but
Mm.
we're going to sing about that in the song as somehow your pussy got you the ring. Well, what the fuck does your ring mean? Because your ring doesn't mean
Mm.
the same thing that my ring means.
Right. Right.
Like, don't we want men that are loyal to us and not distracted by just any wet ass pussy that's walking around? Because he can get that anywhere.
Right.
It's cheap.
Right.
There's so much power there. I'm like, there's so much power
Yeah.
in this sexual energy, but just the act in and of itself, if there's no sacred sexual energy exchange behind it, there's no good and there's no like
Mm.
loving intention embodied in that sacred container.
Mhm.
It's cheap.
Right. Well, I also wonder too, Kayla, in the sense of, you talked about this as well when we were chatting about this on Instagram, like the porn culture vibe, the
Mm-hmm.
toxicity here in the sense of like, yes, as the masculine is going to be the leader, but the feminine energy is creating the way for that. Like, we are actually leading with our energy. And
Yeah.
you were talking about, we lead the way for our men. We show them
Yeah.
what's okay and what's not. Can you talk a little bit about that, and like how this video and this depiction again, if it's just like we're playing with the archetype in the bedroom, totally different. But
Right.
from taking this with zero context and again, up for
Right.
interpretation, how is this dangerous in how we're teaching and leading our men?
100%. Yeah, absolutely. Because again, we all have that polarity within us, right? That healthy balance that we should be striving for between
Mm,
masculine and feminine energy. And it should be light energy, love conquers all, right? That sacred energy
mm,
exchange. And when we meet, is how I view it, when we meet in sacred sexual union with our partner, it's the completion of that yin yang circle, that
mm,
perfect balance, that perfect harmony that, you know, we can't get on our own if we're
right.
just, if you're just flicking the bean by yourself, like you're not going to get that same connection.
Yeah.
There's
Yep.
there's a definite spiritual component here, and the deeper we go in culture of just ignoring the spiritual component, like
Mhm.
pretend it doesn't exist, the more dangerous this becomes, in my opinion, because
Mm,
it's desensitizing people and it just becomes cheap. And
yeah.
when I take that perspective of this being sacred and there's a spiritual component to sex that has been lost
Mm,
in our culture, I go back to that polarity, and that, like you mentioned, the masculine is pursuer oriented,
mhm,
protector oriented, provider oriented,
mhm,
and the
mhm,
feminine is receptive.
mhm,
But being receptive does not mean that you're passive.
mm,
You're not a doormat. You're not
mhm,
passively just like waiting for him to make all the moves necessarily.
mm,
You're inviting. There's nothing wrong with initiating and,
mhm,
quote unquote, leading the way.
mhm,
That's part of the responsibility we have in that light goddess energy, is that
mm.
we are the gatekeepers to sex.
Right. Right.
He can't do anything. He shouldn't be able to do anything. I'm not trying to trigger anyone who's experienced traumatic sexual experiences, but he should not be able to do anything if you are not receptive to his advances and to his pursuit.
Mm,
So we are the gatekeepers. And as
mm,
being the gatekeepers of sex, as the feminine role in a relationship, it creates a beautiful container for the
mm,
masculine to experience all that he is divinely created to be as your
mm,
provider, protector, and pursuer.
mm.
It's beautiful. It's like the ocean meeting the shore,
Right. Right.
Um, and as a woman, we get to direct that energy. We get to receive that energy. And
Mm,
that is the spiritual side, the 5D aspect of the 3D component
mm,
manifest as the 3D, which is, we can see it manifest physically in the 3D as the penis and the vagina. The
mhm,
vagina is very receptive. It's a receptive
mhm,
part of our body. Like it literally, like it's like a cup,
mhm,
the
mhm,
womb, right? And then you have the penis, which is very like arrow energy oriented. It's
mm,
very pursuant. It's very purposed. It's
mm. Yeah.
standing at attention, right? So when you see that as being the 3D manifest experience of the spiritual component of sex,
Mhm,
it started to click for me. And I hope that maybe that
mm,
imagery helps it click for other women and men out there listening, because it's just like, it's so fundamental to who we
mhm.
are. Obviously, it's how we
Right.
all got here.
Right.
And I just feel like women, I understand the liberation movement. I understand the
Mhm,
collective experience. At least I
mhm,
feel like I have a pretty good understanding of the collective
mhm,
experience that was required through all of that, with the feminist and liberation movement, with the birth control movement, giving women um, a feeling of having sovereignty and power over their sexuality for the
yeah.
first time in maybe forever. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So
Yeah.
I get that um, logically, but
Mm,
in my emotional body, I still feel like we as women have more power than we gave ourselves credit for as the gatekeepers of sex. Did we really need a pill to give us our power? No, I don't believe we did.
mhm. Right.
I don't believe we did. I believe that what the pill did in another in another perspective, I believe what the pill did actually for womanhood is, instead of liberating us,
Mhm.
it just took away responsibility.
Well, and then too, if you look at it on like an energetic component, it just numbed us. It actually further
Yes,
disconnected us from our body and our life force and our power, which if you want to
100%.
look at how the patriarchy broke women, like back in the day, women were worshiped, women were, revered. We were very much like the divine feminine, the goddess ruled. And now again, I don't believe in like, all women and men suck, again, not a man hater.
No.
I think we rule
Yeah.
together and there's sacred union there.
Yeah.
But there was this sense of like we were shut down because women are powerful. We do have this life force. We have this connection to source. We have this wisdom in our womb space. Like we are, like you said, the
Hmm.
gatekeepers. We hold these powerful keys. We can take a partner, right? And like a man, for example, a man can't go somewhere that a woman doesn't take him. Like we
Hmm.
have this like magical power of sorts, and there is responsibility there. There absolutely is. And again,
Hmm.
not that every single sexual act and encounter has to be this like sacred sexual, experience. It doesn't. I'm down for a quickie. I'm down to get fucked, be a little rough, be a little kinky. Like there can be the both and. It's like where is the piece around too, like what Russell Brand was saying, in terms of, he was like, I was addicted to porn, I was addicted to sex, I can't watch stuff like this because it's not healthy for me. It
Right.
doesn't do, like, of course I see these women as beautiful, they're powerful, I'm, attracted to this goddess energy. Again, we awaken this in men when we bring them in that. He was like, but it's
Yeah.
not productive for me to watch this. I don't like who I am, of what this is activating in me. And so he says, I choose not to partake. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying porn is a bad thing. There can be very beautiful, ethical porn. He's like, but it's not my jam. And so it's just, again, you have to notice, like, when you're watching this, when you're listening, when you're absorbing this, what is happening in your body? What is
Yeah.
happening in your energy? What is your own discernment saying? And can you trust that? Because for me, when I have these experiences in my body, a lot of times I can try to talk myself out of it by trying to be woke, by trying to be like,
Yeah.
oh, let me elevate above and try to see all of these perspectives, even though in my body, I'm like, this feels off to me. And instead of
Yeah.
trusting that and trusting my body's cues, I can very easily talk myself out of it. Where if I just trusted it without an explanation and without reasoning, I think our culture would look very, very different. And there's the double standard too, in the sense of like, okay, if we're dissecting this in women rapping, we also have to look at the hip hop industry of men, of like the Lil Waynes and the Drakes and all of this, because I can get down with some hip hop, but at the same
Yeah.
time, then there is that, again, hypocrisy, where it's okay when they say it and it can be a good beat, but then it's not okay because it's setting women back over here. Like we do have to find some sort of really liberation from this old patriarchal, toxic view of sexual liberation. Could sexual liberation and empowerment actually be liberating and empowering without having to
Mhm.
be objectifying, without having to
Yes.
look this way? Like, could we go there as a culture? I do believe we
Right.
could.
I agree with you, and I think that that is a beautiful trajectory that we need to pursue in our conversations and in our own growth experiences, absolutely. Because the thing too is like we're looking at women who, as I mentioned earlier, have had a whole lot of plastic surgery done. Well, the whole plastic surgery industry is about glorifying youth and objectification of
Mhm.
the sexual aspects of a woman's body.
Sure.
Fuller lips, bigger boobs, bigger butts, and the
Mhm.
fitness industry, same thing. Like the fitness industry is very, very guilty of glorifying bigger booties. It's like it's all about doing your glute exercises right now. And no,
Right.
nobody wants your butt cheeks on the back of your kneecaps. But at the same time, your best, like I always talk to my clients about this. I'm like, your best self doesn't need to look like Kate Moss or Meg the Stallion. Like, what does your best self look like? And then we can pursue that. And the pursuit of that should not be coming from a place of scarcity and shame, but should be coming from a place of abundance, of getting to know yourself on a fundamentally physiological level that we all basically skipped over the last few generations
Right.
because doctors were so quick to prescribe the pill for every little freaking thing starting at 12
Mhm.
and 13.
Mhm.
Most of the women in our generation, we've never known our bodies to have a legit natural cycle. We don't even know what that
Right.
means.
Right.
And to me, that's tragic because as we're sharing here, there's so much power and so much responsibility in that,
Mhm.
but we're going to just shut it off like take a pill
Mm,
every day and shut it off.
right.
That's not right. That's
Well,
just
and
not
that's is
right.
should that be where we're starting with liberation, versus
Right.
the very like sexualized version? Because again, like where does, we almost look to like I'll watch women do this where in order to be sexually liberated, in order to be sexual, I need to like literally be much more in the sexual blueprint than even like a sensual. Because to me, sensuality and sexuality are very different. One isn't good
Right.
and one isn't bad, but we do have a lot of like wounded shadow maiden energy going on in this video. Whereas, like, where is the, powerful, sovereign, self contained, energetic boundaries type of liberated woman who is in her light and isn't in the shadow
Right.
wounded side? So it's really and truly, again, it goes back to at the end of the day, who's to say? I don't fucking know. God, I guess, but like all of our experiences with God is very different. Two, is it one song's responsibility to teach us all of this? If anything, I just look at this song as a beautiful invitation to have these types
Mhm.
of conversations and
100%.
re-establish and re-anchor into our boundaries, our limits, our beliefs, our viewpoints, and really like how does that individually then trickle into the collective experience of sexual
Mhm.
liberation, recognizing the very real programming, brainwashing, evil, dark forces at play in our world right now. And does this have something to do with it? I don't know. You have to decide that for yourself. Watch Out of Shadows, please, if you have not already. um,
Yes.
and just start to wake up to these things, because as you do, you are going to see it and you're going to be able to discern differently. If you're like, no, Disney's great, it's so innocent and da 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 da, then please dig deeper, keep doing research, because again, once you see it, you'll see it differently, how it's trickled in very subliminally into our culture. And where do we take our power back to change the trajectory for our children and our children's children? Because we do have a
Absolutely.
responsibility in that, whether you're going to be a parent
Yeah.
or not.
Yeah.
I used to, honest to God, I said this yesterday and this probably sounds bad, but I told my mentor, I was like, honestly, before I was pregnant, I guess I didn't really think much about the future after I was gone, because I was kind of like, whatever, I'm going to be gone. Who gives a fuck? Now it's like there's this like ultimate responsibility of like, oh shit, like I'm leaving humans behind that are going to live in this. Like I have this like sacred responsibility. And should I have felt that way before? Yes. Like that was probably not super awesome of me. It's very naive of me, but like it hit
Well,
differently,
again, but again, don't shame yourself. Like you can
Right.
only, this
Right.
is part of your experience and this is part of your growth. You know what I mean? Like you can't know what you don't know
Right.
until you know it.
Exactly.
But yeah, and I would even take that thought line a step further. I would even say like right now, whether you have children or you plan on having children in the future or not, we not only have a responsibility to our future, but we have a responsibility to the generations past, where
Mm,
we have mother and
so
father
true.
wounds from generations past that is uh, very very present in our
Mhm.
current reality, in our current collective consciousness. It's
Right.
coming. I believe that that is part of what is coming forth and
Mm,
what is showing itself as such stark polarity and getting such
mm,
great growth reactions from people and having conversations like this, is because we are clearing old wounds that are not necessarily ours from this lifetime. I know that
mm,
that's probably going to make me sound crazy to a lot of people, but
mm,
there are generational curses in our bloodlines, every single one of our bloodlines and our family's lineages, that it's biblical. And I believe that energetically it's been proven, um, stored in our DNA. It really,
100%.
really is. And it's, again,
100%.
that's that spiritual experience manifest physically. It's in
Mhm,
our DNA. So
mhm,
it's our responsibility not only to set up our futures to be better for our children and our children's children, but in
mhm,
order to do that, we have to learn from history
mm,
and clear those energetic patterns and woundings that are
mm,
stuck in our DNA. Because women's wounds, again, the power that we hold and the massive responsibility that we've been deconditioned from for generations now, our wombs, there's been proof actual, and I have to show you that. I'll have to send this study to you if I can find it again. But I was just reading a couple weeks back that there is the eggs that were in your grandmother's
Yeah.
womb or her ovaries
Yep.
held DNA that passed down to you, that then passed down, like you hold your grandmother and your great grandmother's DNA in your
Yep.
eggs,
Yep.
and then that just passes down. The study made it sound like it made more sense than I just did, but
No,
the
makes perfect
point
sense. Yeah.
the point is that those energetic patterns are present in our eggs, and I believe that whether or not we produce another life with those eggs,
Yep.
it is our responsibility to clear that energetically for
Yeah.
generations, because as the saying goes, if we do not learn from past, we're doomed to repeat it. So that has a lot more to do with than just with statues being torn down or not.
Right.
It has a lot to do with our own patterns of thought and spiritual
Mm.
experience and DNA. And it's really beautiful when you start peeling off the layers and start to get past the programming and the conditioning that we've been subject to our whole lives.
Beautifully said. Yeah. Oh my God. This has been such a powerful conversation, very potent. I hope that everyone was able to take, again, take what you want, leave the rest, sit with these
Mm-hmm.
questions and these curiosities. I have a group program right now called Wide Awake, where this is what we do is we present these like very typically divisive, controversial, taboo topics and allow everyone to sit with it and share their own perspectives without judgment, and just knowing like you're safe here, you're welcome here, everything's allowed, everything belongs. And that's what we've been diving into. This was one of the conversations we had is around WAP, because I was like, I'm just curious from everyone's different perspectives and everyone's different lifestyles. And it was a pretty collective, very much like what you and I were saying, but it is really interesting to just continue to unpack these. So thank you so much for
It's
being
so
here today and
fascinating. Oh, absolutely. Thank you for
sharing.
creating this space and
Yeah.
inviting me in, and just everything that you said. I think it was really, there's so many challenging thought lines that we're maneuvering through, and it's not always going to be the most graceful thing. Like, not everything I said today felt very graceful to me, but at the same time, it's just sometimes you have to just do the hard things and say the
It's
hard things
messy.
and work through it and
Mhm.
be messy. Like,
Mhm.
don't be afraid of being messy and having these hard conversations with your friends and
Mm.
your family and your husbands and boyfriends and loved ones, because it's those little conversations,
Mm.
whether they're on a podcast or not, it's those conversations that will help to guide and steer that collective
Yep.
trajectory that you and I are talking about.
Beautifully said. Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, this is messy. Talking about controversial things is messy and it's imperfect, but it's so beautiful and it's so expanding at the same time. So
Yeah.
Kayla, now that everyone is like, okay, where do we go for more of this? I know you obviously share things that are tend to be controversial on your Instagram. I know I do as well. Where can people go to connect with you further, whether they feel called to connect with you to work with you or to follow you and have further conversations like this?
The easiest place and the place that I hang out the most online is Instagram. So that's probably the most collective source.
Mhm.
But that is at the Fit Patriot.
I
So if
love
you
it.
do like the feminine version of Patriot, so it's just the Fit Patriot with ETTE at the end instead of the normal Patriot. That's my Instagram, Kayla Michelle there, or my website is fittuition.com.
Beautiful. Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. For those of you who are listening, connect with me over on Instagram at Olivia Seline. I do wonder some days how much longer we'll be on Instagram because you and I both talk
Yeah,
about things that go against the mainstream. So
yeah,
connect with us on our websites and in other places as well, because God only knows how much longer we will not be censored, and people are getting
yeah,
shut down left and right. And I'm not naive to that. So connect
right.
with us here on the podcast, connect with us over on Instagram, on our websites, wherever we hang out. I'll have everything in the show notes below, along with the Russell Brand video, the Tim Ballard and Candace Owens video, and a couple of the other things that we had mentioned in this conversation as well. Let us know what you want us to riff on next time. What do you guys want to hear about that's controversial and taboo from two women who work with the divine feminine, who work in these energies, who work in this realm, and have some very, very strong points of view? We would love to do so. Thank you to everyone for listening, for
Thank
being
you.
here, for being willing to see things differently and be expanded. And we're excited to see what you loved. Share it over on Instagram, tag us both, And we'll see you all next time. Have a beautiful week. Bye, guys.
Bye.